Hey, what is going on, Xbox and PC fans? It is Josh bringing you guys a preliminary look at graphics and specs that we have available to us at this time for the PlayStation Pro versus the Xbox Project Scorpio. So starting off with the PlayStation Pro, the specs that we know about this unit so far include a 2.1 gigahertz, essentially what is two quad-core tablet CPUs kind of strapped together. The same chip basically that's on the Xbox One at 1.75 gigahertz and the PS4 at 1.6 gigahertz. So that chip is slightly boosted, but it's still a pretty weak CPU, to be honest with you guys. The GPU does see a pretty substantial boost, up from 1.84 teraflops on the PS4 to about 4.2 teraflops, and utilizing some newer technology, probably Polaris based on the GPU side of things, maybe with some features in there from Vega as well. 8 gigabytes of DDR5 with memory bandwidth right around 218 megabytes per second. And of course, there is no UHD Blu-ray drive there for giving you, larger amounts of data, etc. on a disc. Working with the old Blu-ray drive on that unit just for the time being anyway. Hopefully Sony will upgrade that in the future, but for this time, as far as we know so far, that's the only option available. Now, Xbox Project Scorpio does see a substantial boost over and above that, with the CPU as of yet unknown, but very possibly being a Zen architecture-based AMD CPU. Of what speed we don't know, but at a minimum, it'll certainly be more powerful than what's in the PlayStation Pro, that is for certain, and hopefully be a brand new architecture that is going to be a lot better in terms of performance for floating point and energy calculations. Just CPU tasks in general should be a big boost on the CPU side of things for Xbox Project Scorpio. And on the GPU side of things as well, we're getting another 50% essentially compute performance out of the GPU with 6 teraflops based on Vega architecture, more than likely from AMD. So a very robust GPU there, paired with 12 gigabytes of GDDR5 running at 320 gigabytes per second. Also, we are going to have a high definition, an ultra high definition Blu-ray player on that device, capable of giving us, larger amounts of data to work with on the disc, and delivering obviously high resolution texture packs that can fit into the extra RAM and VRAM provided by that unit. So taking a look here at some of the initial footage from Mass Effect, the Sony press conference, the game definitely does look pretty good, and this is an EA game, so it's Frostbite 3, and I just wanted to show you guys that although this is not a real 4K render, and does have some aliasing around the edges, that's going to be pretty typical of these PlayStation Neo games. Not really enough horsepower there to drive a true 4K native image, so showing you guys what that looks like in terms of other games. Here is another Frostbite 3 engine game from EA, and you can see that the Xbox Scorpio version, at least what I'm calling that version for the time being, coming in true 4K versus the upscaled 4K with a little bit lower settings on the PlayStation Neo, PlayStation Pro, just looks a whole lot better. And you can see here in Star Wars Battlefront, another Frostbite 3 engine title, that even in 4K, if the PlayStation Neo or PlayStation Pro were ever to get to 4K, they'd have to lower some settings pretty substantially, and I've knocked those down to medium here, and what you can see is basically just a lot of visual artifacts. There's little bits of pop-in and it's kind of just bright spots on the screen. There is some kind of swimming and just not very refined edges on top of the boxes over there that we'd like to see with a good 4K native image. And there's some texture pop in here as well. So these are things typical of the Frostbite 3 engine I wanted to show you guys. And you can see here that moving to ultra resolution, ultra settings rather, at 4K resolution, that all of those issues are alleviated. We no longer have serious bouts of texture pop in. We no longer have the swimming on top of the boxes that makes it look just not very clean or not very solid. And all of the visual artifacts in terms of the bright spots and other stuff like that, just visual anomalies, are basically completely gone in the ultra settings render of the same scene. So that's what I expect is a pretty large gap, honestly, even bigger than this. I would also expect to see the PlayStation Neo, PlayStation Pro have to lower the resolution substantially as well, talking about a difference of 2 teraflops and 100 plus gigabytes of memory bandwidth as well, and another 50% less VRAM as well on that unit. So here again are medium settings for texturing, and you can see that there are just visual anomalies that take place, texture pop in. The scene does not look that great, considering this is actually again a 4K native resolution render. And the Xbox Scorpio, running at Ultra would have no problem, at least relatively speaking, if the Neo were to hit 4K medium settings. It could run these settings all day long, probably at a higher frame rate as well. And you can see the textures are just very clean, and the scene overall looks a whole lot better. So that's what you can expect on some Frostbite 3 engine titles. And moving on to some other titles like The Witcher 3, here is a scene that's not quite in 4K, it's upscaled 4K, so something about what the Neo would offer, and also having to disable things like Hairworks, so just a more simplified system for hair rendering, etc. And here you can see basically the difference would be a 4K native resolution on the Xbox Scorpio with Hairworks enabled, and the scene just looks a lot more solid, a lot less jaggies and aliasing around the edges, as well as some more natural and flowing hair and water as well. So that's a great scene to kind of show a difference there, and just visual quality between these two systems as far as what I expect to see given their difference in power, CPU, VRAM, etc, etc. So here again we can see that the ultra settings look very, very good, and the somewhat lesser settings at a lower resolution, still higher than 1440p, somewhere in between 1440p and 4K, is where I expect most Pro titles to wind up, right around this resolution. But again, compared to the Ultra settings on 4K, which is where I'd expect the Xbox Scorpio to be, it just really isn't a comparison, and it's a massive gap in terms of graphics capabilities. You can see here in Doom as well. Starting off, again, both of these are going to be rendered above 1440p. This is going to be the PlayStation Pro, rendered slightly below 4K with some lower settings, and you can see here that the Xbox Scorpio version, again rendered at true 4K with ultra settings, just looks a lot more atmospheric. You get definitely a more real sense of the world. Here again we can see this scene that things still do look pretty sharp on the Neo, upscaled to 4K with some decent settings. But of course, if you're able to run this again in native resolution 4K with ultra settings, you are going to see a big difference in terms of the visuals, which hopefully the Xbox Scorpio can provide. And with those kind of specs, I certainly don't doubt it. Here we have another look at Doom and the character models. This one is not a very important character model, obviously. This is a dead NPC, for God's sakes. But you can see here the texture quality differences going from a not quite 4K resolution upscaled to a native 4K resolution, which is what Phil Spencer and the Xbox department are promising. And here we can see the old PlayStation knock on Xbox last generation, the amount of grass. And we're going to have a ton of grass with 6 teraflops, 320 gigabytes a second of memory bandwidth, and 12 gigabytes of DDR5. It should fit a ton of grass in the scene just fine and render it at 4K resolution. Moving on to what the PlayStation Pro or Neo will look like relative to this. Here we have a not quite 4K scene and a whole lot less grass. Now what does that get Sony in the end? Well, if you're a quote-unquote 4K console without any grass, you get eaten by a puma, and then you die. Anyway guys, that was my preliminary look at these two systems and their graphics relative to one another. Again, the PlayStation Pro just looks to be an inferior box all around. Honestly, I don't think if they snuck Phil Spencer into Sony's R&D department personally, that it could have made them look any worse than they already do. After the announcement of the PlayStation Pro, people are just up in arms. that they want to get, another $400 out of everybody without even throwing them an ultra high definition Blu-ray player, which Sony themselves invented and could surely give, the consumer at a very, very marginal cost. But obviously choosing not to do that. Let me know what you guys think about this down below in the comments. If you have any opinions on the Pro or the Scorpio, Xbox One S versus the Slim, etc. Let me know your thoughts down below. Appreciate you guys. Hope you're having a great weekend, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace out.